Hey guys and gals, I actually just realized the other day from YouTube analytics that 10% of my viewers are actually female. Kind of interesting. Anyways, welcome to another video from the team here at BlenderTech.com. Don't forget to like the video and to subscribe for more Blender, Unity 3D, programming, and all sorts of other videos. We try to add at least one video a day. Oh, Andrew Price coffee coming up again. And lastly, don't forget to remember, create your way. So I've had the Addon spotlight showcase whatever it's playlist up for over a week now with just my little introduction promising I was going to show off every add-on and in all its detail. Oh man, just coming right up. Anyways, so I decided I'd get started with that this morning. So I'm using a daily build. The most recent stable build that I found is November 20th. So if anything is different from yours, or if anything crashes, and I apologize, I suggest that you download the latest daily build. They're always very, very stable. But anyways, yeah, we're going to get started. I'm going to do one that is very, very popular, and that is creating and animating realistic trees. So we're going to be using the Sapling generator. Now, people have said, why is this called the Sapling generator? Why isn't it just called the tree maker? And I don't know why. I wasn't on the development team for it, obviously, but it creates trees and it does it very well. So if you don't have it enabled already, you just go into your user preferences and under add-ons, just search up Sapling, and it's Add Curve Sapling. So it was made by Andrew Hale. The current version in this daily build is 0.26. Just check it off and save your user settings and you're good to go. So to add a tree to your scene, quite simple. And we're gonna get into texturing and everything and alpha channels to make everything look really realistic. So you just hit Shift A, then you want to add a curve. Add tree. See, it says add tree, but the add-on is Sapling. Add tree, and it comes up with this weird looking little thing. I'm not going to use the F6 floating panel just because it's hard to use when you got lots of options like this. Instead, I'm going to go full screen and I'm going to open up my T toolbar instead of my operator presets set here. Oh, where's the bar with all my transparency? I can't see them sometimes. So yeah, it's very, very basic. The first thing you want to do, unless you're doing something completely custom, is hit bevel, and that'll obviously give you trees and branches instead of just a curve. Bevel resolution just says what shape these should be. Like you can see right now it's set to 0, which is just 4, so it's a quad. Every curve is made of a quad. I believe this is in powers of 2, so you want to set it to about 2, and that'll give you a nice little cylinder. If you're doing something up close, set it a little bit higher, but do realize that it will take longer to render, and if you're adding an armature and animating, that might slow down or crash your computer depending on how complicated your tree is. Handle type, just leave it on the stock settings, like I said, unless you're doing custom stuff. Shape, you can choose a different shape, but you can usually get the tree you want from actually editing the settings. Presets, they do work. There are some good presets, but I tend not to use them. Random seed, that just obviously gives you a random result every single time. The ratio, as you can see, defines the ratio of the base compared to the rest of the tree. So you can actually use this for making like quick horns and stuff. Then you just convert it to a mesh, and then you can take the little branches off and you can make really cool looking horns for characters. But the stock setting is 9 times out of 10 fine. If you want a little bit more character-y looking tree, you can bump it up to like 0.3 or 0.5 maybe. You know, it gives you a little bit more of a cheesy looking tree, but yeah, 0.01 or less is what I find to be the best, because these are just basic geometry settings. We will be making it look better. Scale is how high, basically the scale overall actually, it's above the branches and the height. I usually leave it around 10. Gives you a pretty realistic size, because I believe that's measured in meters, so that'd be a 30-foot high tree, your average tree. Scale variation, that one again varies the scale. It really does about the same thing, as you can see, so I leave it on the stock setting. The radius scale, again, plays with the trunk. Again, it does basically a similar thing to the ratio. So again, I leave it on the same setting, and scale variation just varies that. So as you can see, if I go way up, everything gets really tiny, and if I go way down, everything gets thicker. So these all settings really do the same, so I tend to leave them on default. So next up, branch splitting. So this lets you decide how many branches you're going to have. So one level, you just have what would you call that? Just a log. 2 levels, you have a next level of branches coming out. 3 levels, there's branches coming off of your branches. 4 levels, and this is where stuff really starts to get heavy. Even my computer's really having a hard time, and I don't recommend doing this unless you're just doing it as a static object. You now have branches coming off of your branches, coming off of your branches. So I usually stick with 3. 2 works if you just want kind of a, obviously like it's going to depend on your scene, but I usually choose about 3. Base splits, that basically says how many times is the tree split at its base. So let me go down here. It's really, really slow. So if you go to 2, you can see it just splits basically at the base. I rarely use this because it's not the best for this. If you want a realistic looking tree and it doesn't need to be animated, I would suggest a third-party actual tree generating program, like what is it? Arbor or something, I believe, makes good trees and gives you a lot more detail into what the settings do. And the base size is where your branches are going to start from. So I always turn this down to about decimal 10, decimal 15, decimal 20, somewhere in there. Because you can see decimal 40, it's almost halfway up the tree. That's pretty unrealistic for your standard type of tree. So yeah, I set this to about decimal 15. You can see that makes my branches reach down lower. And then for your branches, basically it's the number of branches grown at each level. So, whoa, okay, what did I just do? The first setting, I'm not going to do anything because obviously you only have 1 branch at the base level. That is your log, your trunk level. The next level, the number of branches grown at each level, and branches. So that's for the next level. So that's for your main branches coming off of your stump or your log. So you turn that down and you get less branches coming off of your main tree. So I like to turn that down. If I'm doing animations, I'll choose about 20. And as you can see, that really, really creates a less full tree. And then the next level is obviously branching off of that one. So set it to 0. I have no branches coming off of my second level. Set it up a little higher, and I start getting more and more branches coming off of my second level. So, I don't know, somewhere around there. You generally want less and less as it goes on and on. Because if you go more, it's going to look really, really overgrown and weird. So you generally want your levels to go down as it goes on. Now, the last one isn't going to do anything either because we don't have a last level. So that one you can just leave alone. Split angle, I'm not going to get too much into. That's just the angle at which they split. Again, the first setting will never do anything. It can change things. A lot of things are broken in this script, but I'm not really going to get into that. So the down angle, as you can see, it affects kind of how the tree would grow. If I go way, way down on my first level, you can see that it grows almost straight upwards. But if I bring it down, you can see that it's now growing downwards. And a perfect 90 would have it pointing straight outwards at the trunk there. So again, it really depends on what your scene is. If it has if you want it to look like there's a lot of, or if you have a scene where there's like a lot of snow on your leaves, you might want the down angle to be lower. I tend to go slightly low because gravity does affect branches. So I tend to make my numbers, well, obviously your main branch is going to be 90. Like I said, changing that has no effect unless you have branched your main trunk. But yeah, I tend to make this one slightly higher than 90, just to let it, gravity, you can tell, has a little bit of effect on it. The next one is the other branches. It really since they're not growing directly out of anything, it really, you just gotta play with it and see what looks best. So I just usually leave it its default value. Rotate angle, same kind of thing. First one doesn't do anything. The second one just rotates around where the tree they go. It really, yeah, does nothing. If I go all the way down to 0, they all start at one point, so you could make some weird looking trees. And then, yeah, the more you rotate it, the more your branches get rotated. So you can make weird looking trees. I tend to leave these stock because they're pretty good as it are, and as it is. And the same with the last level. If you set it to 0, they're all going to be going like straight up. So you can create some weird looking trees, but I leave those at the stock settings. So very quickly on to branch growth. Trunk starting angle does nothing. Vertical attraction, this is how much does your branches attract to the top of your tree. So where is this setting? Okay, yeah. So like 0, it's going to be no attraction one way or the other. Negative, it's going to be straight down. Positive, it's going to be straight up. So I, again, leave that as stock setting. It seems to be pretty realistic. Length just sets how long your branches are. Again, unless I'm doing a specific tree, I tend to leave these at their stock lengths. Otherwise, you really got to spend a lot of time playing with them. Curvature, this can have a lot of effect. So you can see how am I doing 2 at once? That was weird. So this is where the first one does make a difference. You can have your tree leaning over and such. So this is where you can add a little bit of realism to your tree by making it look like it's leaned over if you're not animating it. If you are, like we are, I tend to just leave it, but you can see how it has the effect. Almost the same as the vertical attraction. But yeah, it's just the curvature from the branch at which angle. So you can see the effect it has. I just leave them stock 99% of the time. Back curvature does the same thing, basically, just on the back side. So it has less of an effect because you're working on basically the back sides of the branches, but again, doesn't really do a lot. Curve resolution, this is where I believe you can get more quality in your branches. So the first one, if I turn it up, my tree it changes, but it's basically just a straight curve. So I leave that as low as possible. About a 2. As you can see, 3 really has no difference. So yeah, about a 2. I guess 3, the stock setting that way. It's basically stock. Well, yeah, about a 2 or 3. The lower, the faster, and everything's gonna work once I go to do the animation. The next one. Again, this is where if I turn it down to 1, you can see the branches are just straight. They have no curve to them at all. Where if I set it up to like 6 or 7, you can see they have a lot of, you can see in one branch, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You can see they have a lot more resolution. I tend to keep this as low as possible, because once you get a bunch of leaves, you're not going to see it as much, but the higher you go, the more realistic it's going to look. So you just got to play with the settings so it looks realistic. Again, I tend to keep it on the stock settings, and it's the same thing for the last one. If you set it really high, whoa, that's way too high. It's going to be really, really realistic, but you can see my memory usage. You can see how many vertices, like a resolution of 82 has created 76,000 vertices. If I leave it back stock value of 3, it goes down to 4,000. So that really, really, really can affect your performance. So I tend to leave these branches as my last row of branches off the secondary branches as low as possible, because they're going to be filled with leaves and you're not really going to be able to really tell a lot about curves. So 2, maybe a little bit higher if you're going for realism, but yeah. The higher you go, the longer it's going to take to do everything, and the better chance of crashing. Pruning, this just allows you to basically prune your tree. It creates, what do you call those things? But basically you can play with the shape of it, and it'll prune based off that that secondary curve that it's making. So that's something that you can play with, but I never use unless I really need to. Leaves. So now we want to click show leaves, and you're going to see, okay, that does not look like leaves at all. Well, they don't yet. Hexagonal is if you just want to create a cartoonish looking tree and you just want to texture your leaves green. We don't want to do that. We want to use a real texture. So we're going to make them rectangular. And so from here, leaves is how many leaves you have. So 0, and then it goes up from there. I'm just going to leave it at the stock value. Leaf scale. Obviously how big or small they are. The stock value is fine. I found is fine. Leaf scale X makes them more rectangular. Again, I try to leave them as square as possible. So 0.5 but or so to make them squares instead of rectangles. And then leaf distribution, that'll just change the look of your overall tree. I'm not going to play with it because it'll mess up a lot of settings. I'm just going to leave it right there. And leaf bend, it bends your leaves. You would see this more in the hexagonal. If I quickly make it hexagonal, you can see how it, let me zoom into one. You can see how it bends them a little bit. It's kind of hard to tell, but it does bend them. But we're going to be using rectangular leaves, which don't bend, obviously. So that doesn't really do anything other than rotate them. So I just leave it there. So we're almost there. We're getting onto the good stuff now. So lastly, armature. So if we're creating an animation, which we are, this is where you start. If you're not, don't do this step because it is computational heavy and it can crash Blender, and it definitely bogs it down. So frame rate, number of frames per second, which can be used to adjust the speed of animation. I leave it at 1. That makes obviously the most realistic animation, but you can turn it up if you want a less realistic animation. You want things to go faster. Wind speed, I don't think it's measured in miles an hour. I haven't quite figured this out, but that's basically how much is the wind going to be blowing back and forth. And then wind gust is basically almost a randomizer, but it's gusts of wind. So you get your wind, and then at random, there'll all of a sudden be a gust of wind that'll blow it really one direction. So if you turn that higher than 2, every once in a while, it'll really gust it over. So maybe I'll turn that on just for fun. So you want an armature animation so that it's animated from stock, unless you want to animate it by hand, which is not fun. So you want to make sure that's enabled. Then just hit use armature, and it will take a minute to generate. Actually, that was really quick. It's probably because I made this a very simple tree. There's very few branches and very few leaves. So there we go. We now have an armature. So I'm going to get rid of that toolbar. I'm going to go open up this one. So you now see that we have this tree arm. So that stands for tree armature. We have the animation, we have the pose. So you can go and pose each individual branch manually. And you have tree, which is the actual curve. So again, you could go and you could edit. Let me go into it quickly. You could go to 6. I'm still going to use the pie menus. You can go and edit the curves manually, but it does a really good job, obviously, at stock. So, and then it's got a modifier on it, which is just the wind sway modifier, which just has to do with the posing. So you don't need to worry about it. It has to do with armatures. It's an armature constraint, basically. And then under tree, you have tree, which is the curve, and leaves, which is the leaves. So again, you could go into edit mode and you could adjust each leaf manually, or you could move them, but I am not going to, because that can be a full day's job. So if I open up my timeline now, you can see our basic results. So if I hit play, you will see basically what will be happening. I don't know why my leaves aren't coming, because I'm in edit mode. If I go into object mode, so you can see basically what we got. So it's blowing, and then there's the odd gust, like right there, that really blows it hard. So this is a really gusty day. That's what. So yeah, I turned it up quite high. I am at 300 frames at 30 frames per second. But yeah, you get that basic animation. So obviously my wind speed was a little bit high. I don't believe I can go and change it now. No, I've done too much stuff. So you got to play with it to get the settings that you want. After a while, you'll know what the settings do and what they should generally be for the effect you want. Stock settings are generally good. You can just leave them like that. But now we want to make it look like a real tree. So let's go to frame 1. So first of all, let's add in a plane. This is just going to be our ground. We'll just scale it up. We'll just add a quick material. And we'll just make it brown. I've been using the hue saturation value wheel lately. I find it really helpful. All I do is I crank up the saturation and the value, and then I go, you can see the hue just spins you right around the color wheel. So I've been using that a lot because it's very easy, because you can get right into the color you want, and then you just adjust the saturation, so how light, or basically how much of the color do you want. So I want a fair amount of color, so about 0.7, and then value is just how dark or how light. So I want it fairly dark. So 0.3, so 30% lightness basically. And then in settings, I'm just going to drag and drop that so we can see that in our viewport. And so there, that's our ground. We're just going to leave it like that. Now for the trunk. So that's under tree armature. Under tree. So that is not that. I'm in edit mode still, object mode. So that is, yes, that is tree right here. So it is currently a curve, but that's no problem. So we need a new new material. So we are going to call this bark or whatever, bark dot matte. Now to get your bark textures, here's what I use. Go to cgtextures.com. I can't give out the textures because you have to sign up, and you're allowed 15 megabytes of download per day, and you're not allowed to download the highest resolution, but they do allow you to download all the textures you want otherwise. So what I do for this is I think you can just search tree action. It gets you basically what you need. Yeah, nature/trees, tree bark, whatever. So choose something you like. Tiled is always a plus. So I will choose, this looks pretty nice. I like that. So yeah, I'm going to download this large one here. That's a nice texture actually. So bark deciduous 0062 if you're wondering which one it is. So there it is if you want to go download it yourself. So I'm going to download this. I'm going to save it. And now we need a leaf texture. And this is where things get very important. So we want nature/trees. Now there should be a category for leaves here somewhere. Where did I find them? You have to give me a minute. More categories. I think maybe I just searched up leaves. Nature/leaves. Yeah, and then just get rid of the tree search result. So there is textures/nature/leaves. Now, you want something that's masked. Otherwise, it's going to add a whole lot of extra work and it's not going to work good. So pick a leaf that you like that has an alpha mask. So it has this background that's transparent, obviously. You can basically pick anything and yeah, it'll look really good. So depending on the season, depending on the type of tree, just pick one that you like basically. So I think I'm just going to stick with something from the first page just to make it easy. That's a nice one right there. Yeah, I think I'll go for that one. Set mask. So we have a bunch of different ones that we can choose. So there's that one, there's that one, there's that one, there's that one. I'm going to choose the one with the most detail because we're going to do some bump mapping. And the biggest resolution that I can get. But I'm not a premium mapper. See, you can see these ones aren't masked, so you'd have to go into Photoshop and do that manually. I could do that, but I am lazy. And I don't really need to do that right now. I already have these textures, but I'm just going to download them for this tutorial's sake. So I'm just going to pick this first one, or the second one here, because it doesn't have this really bent stem. So I'm just going to download that one. and save it. So now we have leaf. So that's leaves is 0018, texture number 27464 if you want to get the same one. And I'm using the second one here. Make sure it's alpha masked. So now we go back into Blender. So for our bark, let's open up the node editor instead of our timeline. I suggest you use your node editor horizontally. That makes things easier. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. I meant to do this. And then just zoom in on a portion of your tree. Go into a rendered view. We're going to need some light, obviously. We're going to add in a image texture, so Shift ATT. Do you remember my tutorial, my tips and tricks that I keep saying? The underline letter is what letter you press to quickly get something. So if I want a mix shader, I just go Shift A, H for shaders, M for mix. So yeah, just something to be aware of. So stretch this way out because we're going to be, or no, not this one. Doesn't need to be stretched way out. So for this one, we're just going to use the image texture of our bark. So let's go, I'm going to go to my downloads. All right, so bark deciduous. And then just attach your color to your color. And I guess you can't see it. Let's add a light in. So let's just add a light somewhere. A sun lamp. Wow, you really can't see anything. The tree generator will create the UV coordinates for you. So, or sorry, won't. So you need to add a texture coordinate node and then go generated to vector for your image texture. Now if I take my sun lamp and turn the strength back down, now we should be able to see the texture. So yeah, it's kind of really stretched, but you can tell that that bark texture is on there. So now we have our bark. Now it's not very realistic. You could turn it into a mesh and UV unwrap it and everything, but it looks good enough if you're just doing a distance scene. If you're not doing a close-up, it's fine. And since it's a tileable texture, we could go in and add a, what am I looking for? A vector mapping. You could just throw that in there, and you could turn the scale up to like a lot higher, equal values. And since it's a tileable texture, you can turn that up till you get the effect you want. So I could turn this up to like 10, 10, 10. And you can play with it. So yeah, that looks pretty realistic, I'd say. Looks pretty good. Doesn't look like there's too much repetition. So yeah, you can add that mapping node in there since it's a tileable texture. Seamless, but if it's not, don't, or you're just going to get ugly results. And let's add in some fun stuff. Let's go Shift A. I should have my screencast keys on. What am I thinking? All right, so Shift A, and you want a vector bump. So just throw it in there, and then take color into height, and then normal into normal. And you see it had an immediate effect. Now it looks like it's bumpy. If I get rid of that, see it doesn't do anything. If I throw it in there, you can see it fakes some bump mapping really quickly. So I like to reverse these settings and give it a height of 1 and a strength of 0.1. I find for doing fake bump mapping like this, that gets you the best results. And then you can play with the strength to get the result you want. It does work either way, but I find this works better. So yeah, somewhere around there. So after, before, after, before. So yeah, that's a quick way to just add some realism in without really doing any work. So yeah, that's done. I totally forgot about that. So now that we have our bark done, now let's work on the leaves. This is where it really gets fun. So make sure you have a leaf selected. You can always go into a different view to make sure you have them selected. So we have our leaves all selected, and we want to add a material. So let's add our material in. I already have one made up called leaves.mat. So for this one, stretch it out quite a bit because we're going to be doing a lot here. It's going to get a little bit messy. So just to start off, for the diffuse, we obviously need an image texture. And so go open and then choose the alpha mask leaf that you downloaded. Not one with a white background, but an alpha masked one. And then just drag color into color. So see, we now have leaves, but they have that black background because of the alpha channel. We're going to fix that, don't worry. So in between diffuse and material, we need to add in some shaders. So first we need a mix. And we want that first. And then we need an add. And then we need another mix. So I just like to think of this as mix, add, mix, diffuse. M-A-M-D. Mammed. Or just mam. And then we're going to need a few different shaders. We're going to need a translucent. We're going to need a transparent. We're going to need a glossy. I guess we can actually bring these in a little bit closer so that you can see everything at once. And just line them up roughly for now. And while we're at it, we can go ahead and add our fake bump mapping in again. So we will add our, vector bump. Then take color into the height and normal into the normal. And you can kind of see, it's hard to see because of the alpha masking, but if I change distance to 1, strength to 0.1, oh, I'm not in rendered mirror. No wonder it's not working. So yeah, you can give it some fake bump mapping. So just get it to the strength you want. I find about 0.25 for leaves works good. So yeah, before or after, before, after. So yeah, just some fake bump mapping. And while you're at it, you can add normal into the other normals too, the glossy and the translucent. All right. So now we need to get rid of those black backgrounds, and we need to add some translucency because leaves are slightly translucent. So to get rid of the black background, take your transparent shader. I'm just gonna make it smaller. We don't need it that big. And then put it into the mix shader, the very last one. And then we want our factor, like you can see I can turn it all the way down, it's black, all the way up, and it's completely transparent, but we want to use our alpha channel. So for our factor, drag it over to the alpha channel. You'll now see it is backwards. There we go. You just got to flip it around in the shader. So there we go. Now the alpha channel's in work or in use, and we no longer have our black boxes. So now we need to add our translucency and a little bit of glossiness. I mean, they look fine now. I mean, that's a fine looking tree if you ask me, but you can go a little bit better yet. So to add in our translucency, where's my translucency? This one right here. That one goes into the bottom of the add. And then we want our color up to our image textures color. Otherwise, it's going to be way too translucent. And you can't really tell. You kind of can, but now it's just ever so slightly translucent. And we could add in a node to be able to play with that factor, but just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to leave that like that. I don't think you actually even need it realistically. I don't think it adds anything, if a lot. It adds a little bit. It does make them slightly more realistic. And you can tweak it, like I said, if we added in like a color ramp or something, or a math node, but I'm going to leave it just like that for simplicity's sake. Now for glossiness. Glossiness is done just like any other one. We simply want our color to be pure white or almost white, depending on your preferences. And you just put it into the last mix shader. And then you can choose. Sorry, I'm going to adjust my microphone here. My foot's falling asleep. You can use your mix shader to choose how glossy you want. So completely glossy, no glossy. This is where the translucent shader actually has some effect now. So I'm going to go maybe 0.2. And then you can also play again with the color to choose if you want black glossiness, which would be weird, but you could actually leave it about 0.8, the stock setting, because you want just a little bit. You want, like you can see here, where the sun is hitting it, leaves are actually a little bit glossy, and where it's not, they're actually quite unglossy. So this is where you can play with the roughness now too. So a quite high value, like if I turn it down to 0, it doesn't really do a lot. If I turn it up to 1, it doesn't really do a lot. So this is where you need to play with the roughness to just get just the right settings so that, yeah, it looks like where the leaf hits it, it's slightly glossy, but where it's not glossy at all, really. So yeah, somewhere around 0.4, 0.5. Maybe I'll go 450. I like that. And again, you can go and play it back with your mix shader if you don't quite think it's right. You can turn it down or up a little. Yeah, maybe I'll go 0.1 for the factor on this mix shader. So if you missed any of that, you have your material output, a mix shader, then an add shader, then another mix shader, then your diffuse shader. Let me stretch this out so we can make sense of it all. Alright, that should make more sense. So yeah, from your material output, you want a mix shader, another mix shader, or sorry, a mix shader. I'm going to move this one up here. You want a mix shader, and then an add shader, and then a mix shader, and then a diffuse, which you'll have by stock. And so from your diffuse, you get your image texture, your color marked in, and then that goes into a mix shader, which also has a glossy shader added into it, which you play with the roughness and the factor and the color. And we have our fake bump mapping, so we take the color of the image, we put it into the height node. I flip the values around here, and then you put your normal into the diffuse and the glossy shader and the translucent shader. The translucent shader goes into your next shader, which is the add shader. Don't make it a mix. And then your colors from the image texture, the normal from the bump, like I said. And then to do the alpha masking, to get rid of that black, you just take your transparent shader with a completely pure white value, and you put it into the top of your mix shader, and then you take your factor and you drag it all the way over to your alpha channel of your image texture. So as I made the mistake at first, if you mix these up, if you put your add shader on top and your transparent on the bottom, it alpha masks the wrong part, so you have to flip those around. So you want your add shader on the bottom and your transparent on top, and by default that's not going to happen, so make sure you make note of that. And then yeah, that is your basic tree. So now we can get rid of the node editor, I guess. I don't think my computer will be able to handle rendering this in real time. If I hit play, yeah, no. But if we go into like texture mode or material, texture, and select like nothing, like the plane there, and go back, you can now see the finished result, kind of. I can zoom in actually. Maybe I'll go material. I don't know, you can't see the bark either way in this views. So I'll just choose a random frame, and first I'll pause it. Let's take our camera I'm going to hit Shift F. This is my favorite way to get the camera settings the way I like them nowadays. And I'm going to pick where I want this. Maybe kind of looking up at the tree. So maybe kind of something like that. And we'll go to our camera and we'll make some quick adjustments. The focal length, we can make 16 millimeters. And we can make a camera preset. I like to use the Canon 7D preset, which is one I've made myself. So that's just a width of 23.30, and it should make it automatically, but a sensor height of 14.90. So just like that is for a Canon 7D. That's my favorite camera setting. And yeah, so now we can choose somewhere nice, like yeah, I like in there. I like that. We can go to our image settings and we could flip this around. We can go 1920 by 1080. And then we can change this again. So yeah, I think somewhere in there probably looks good. We'll just scroll through our animation and make sure we're not, we're losing some of it, but should get most of it. Let's go somewhere where it's way off in the wind gust. Maybe somewhere back there. Yeah, that should get all of it. I'll turn it just to the right a little. Alright, and yeah, just pick a random frame. We can give it a render to see what it looks like. And you can see we have a pretty realistic tree. Now the only thing I'm going to change is the easiest way to add some more realism is to go into your world settings, use nodes, and you can either go and use a sky texture, and you can set up your sky texture however you like it, but I prefer just use an environment texture and then pick a nice HDR. I like Andrew Price's from his lounge room, what do you call it, Architecture Academy. I can't release this obviously because you pay for that, but you can use any image basically that's gonna fit the scene, and I can actually get rid of the ground plane now. So now if we re-render that, there you have it. We have a tree in this field kinda, and you can play with the lighting to make it look realistic. And now that we have environment lighting, I can get rid of the sun lamp, give it another quick re-render, and then when you're done, you should get a result like this. So thanks for watching from the team here at BlenderTech.com. Again, that's BlenderTech.com. If you enjoyed this video and learned something, please like it, and don't forget to subscribe for more Blender, Unity 3D, programming, and all sorts of other videos. We also now offer hard copies of our videos if you'd like to watch it later on the media player of your choice at your own speed. So if you'd like a copy to download, just let us know and we'll upload it to our server, or just use a YouTube downloader. And if you dislike this video for some reason, don't just leave. Instead, leave a comment or email us at info@blendertech.com about what we should change so that we can continually improve our videos. We also take requests for tutorials, so let us know what you want or want more of. See you next time, and remember, create your way.